Hi, my name's George Russell, and you're listening to Downforce Radio.
Yes, everybody, welcome back to another series of Downforce Meets. Some say he was the Stig on Top Gear, the original Stig. Some say that he drove for Andrea Moda in 1992. All we know is that is Perry McCarthy. Great to have you on the show, Perry.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Great. Well, let's start off with talking about what is, in my view, the best autobiography that I have read, and I have read loads. Your book is absolutely excellent. I would like to say we're really well done on that, and you've got an audiobook coming out soon.
I do, yes, and thank you very much for the compliment. It was good fun writing it, and it's just been so nice to see how everybody's received it about this journey. But you're right. So we've lifted it now off print, and I finished recording yesterday for the new audiobook. So that's going to be released about October 10th. And yeah, hopefully it provides a different dimension with me telling the story.
Yep, and I think we all look to hearing it. So let's begin. You, of course, were involved in motorsport for many years. How did this all begin? How did this all come about?
It's really strange because I actually didn't follow motor racing when I was a kid, but I loved cars, and as soon as I had my driving license, I really loved driving. But when I went to college, there was a friend of mine who used to love Formula One and sports car racing, and he used to bring in this magazine called Grand Prix International and had really beautiful photographs of these cars. And so I was studying law, economics, and art, and I started drawing the cars. And then when I was drawing the cars, I was reading about these drivers, and I thought, wow, these guys are pretty cool. And then I started watching it on TV, and then I became really hooked. And my sideline interest in road driving was getting a bit rampy. But I did meet an awful lot of Essex police during those conversations, etc. So I was really enjoying driving. I found that, you know, everybody seemed to think I was pretty good at it. And it was a friend of mine who then arranged for the chief instructor of Brands Hatch Racing to actually come out to meet me. And so he did, and he said, look, I keep hearing about you and your driving. You're coming with me. Took me to Brands Hatch. I took him around the track. He then took me around the track, and he was fantastic. And then I took him around the track and learnt a lot. And he said, that's it. You've got to be a racing driver. And I said, I know. So it was only a little while after that. Then I started finding out what the reality was of coming into motor racing. And of course, as we all know, it's got to be getting a few bob, getting some money together to actually enter motor racing. So I discovered that, and then went about getting the money with that target in mind of coming into motor racing and hopefully taking on the world.
Yep, and as we all know, that sponsorship is a massive problem back then, and is even now. It's just getting absolutely ridiculous these days. We'll come back to some of your sponsorship heroics a little bit later, but you progressed to Formula Ford first off, and you actually won the championship in 1983, I believe, and that was a very competitive field that year.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I worked on the oil rigs for 2 years, and then came in and did a race at the end of 1981, my first real professional race. And then I did 6 races in 1982. And this is kind of just off the street, you know, against people who've been racing and karting and everything else. So I think the speed was there because I set 3 pole positions in that Formula Ford championship, but nobody was worried about me because I was so bloody useless. I was going to be crashing into something fairly shortly on, you know, and I didn't disappoint, you know, that after a little while, they started calling me Perry McCartwheel, you know, so it was my staying on the track ability wasn't particularly developed. The speed was there, so that was important. But the following year, I did a full season. And I did 20 races, and I think I won 10 of them, come second in 6. And you're right, it was, you know, highly competitive, and I won the British Championship. So that was great. And, you know, most importantly, it kind of showed me, maybe I was right. Maybe I'm quite good at this, and maybe there is a future because, you know, by then you're chewing up years. I'd started so late that, you know, my first 6 races, I was 21 years old, you know. We're getting Grand Prix drivers now at like late 17s with Max and stuff, you know. So my own career had to start working very, very quickly, or else the entire project was going to be a complete non-starter. So it was a really good start.
Yep, we had, of course, Mike Thackle even then, who was already at Tyrrell, and he was 17, 18 at the time. So to start a junior career that late was pretty difficult, wasn't it? But then,
Well, Mike did hold the record for quite a long time when he tried to qualify for Tyrrell in, I think it was the Canadian Grand Prix, and Mike was only 19 years old at the time. But you know, he was a great driver, Mike. He really was, you know. But it's sadly for Mike, his Grand Prix career, you know, didn't really take off. But you know, he went on to be fantastic in Formula 2 again and all that kind of stuff. So yeah.
yeah, so it was difficult, wasn't it, to start off that late? But you won the championship with a bit of support from your dad in 1983, who helped you along the way, didn't you, that year?
Yeah, I mean, we made a deal actually because my dad had done pretty well and I'd used all my oil rig money up and all the sponsorship money I'd been finding. So basically, he lent me some money to complete the championship. If I didn't win the championship, it meant that I went to work for his company, which was cleaning the oil rigs, shot blasting the oil rigs, etc., and never mentioned motor racing again. So it was a bit of a gamble for both of us, to be quite honest. But when I won the championship, and I'm pleased to say just a few years later, actually paid him all the money back.
So it did have a happy ending, the story.
Oh yeah.
So of course, then you wanted to progress further than in Formula Ford. Of course, you stayed on for a couple more years, moving up to Formula Ford 2000, I believe.
Well, can I stop you there for a second? Because I didn't really stay on for a couple more years. I think it was the second race of the following year after winning the championship, I had a fairly big accident. In fact, it was a massive accident, and that put me out. It broke my back and absolutely destroyed the car, destroyed the budget. So that was kind of end of season. I came back for a one-off race in, you're quite right, Formula Ford 2000, and you know, qualifying times were, you know, very good. That was, so it looked as if the faster stuff went, the more I liked it. The next year, sorry, just to give you a quick summary, 1985, I was again in Formula Ford. There was a major problem with that. I didn't want to be there. I really didn't want to be in Formula Ford again. And you know something? It was showing. You know, I just really wasn't good enough because I just didn't want to be there. You know, all I wanted to be was in Formula 3. So I kind of used that year literally just to try and make contacts and get the sponsorship and everything else to get to F3, because Formula Ford I kind of hated by then, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen similar things in karting when people stay in the same class for, was it the 5th or the 6th year, and their performance, it's just hasn't been matched in the previous years, and they have to move up in the middle of the season to have that motivation. So yeah, you know, it repeats itself, doesn't it?
Well, I mean, you know all about winning. You know about the psychology of winning and wanting to achieve and wanting to go further and faster and everything else. Because you know, I know a bit about your career. You've done brilliantly.
Yeah, thanks, Perry. I mean, from a former Grand Prix driver, that means a lot. I'm not gonna lie about that. But yeah, I mean, I wish I could say here, Perry, you know, I've had the opposite of your career and it's been as easy as it has been, but I'm afraid it just hasn't been like that. When we go into sponsorship, I might reveal some of my stories, which I have a couple as well, to be honest, which aren't that great. But yeah, it hasn't been easy for me either.
Yeah.
So let's move on to Formula 3, where the budgets were quite high now. You're looking to gain sponsorship, of course. And you're out and about, aren't you? You're on industrial estates. You're looking to see anybody who can really help you.
Yeah, I kind of, you know, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, I'm quite relentless. So if I've made a decision and I need to get the sponsorship, I just, you know, just didn't stop. So if I drove over to an industrial estate, I would walk around and knock on all the doors, trying to talk to the receptionist, trying to get to see the managing director of the company, trying to interest him with all the photographs and what I'm doing and the race reports, and saying that I'm going places and we should have their name on my car and this is what we can do and how we can do with it. And in the meantime, I was talking to all the newspapers in Essex and London and trying to get coverage so that I could show sponsors that even at my level, I was receiving attention from the press and their name would be with me, you know, and so that they would get some kind of advertising benefit from it. So it was just, you know, just relentless hard work. But when you're trying to get the budgets for Formula 3, because even though the budgets today are about 700,000 a year or 750,000 a year, I mean, you have to remember when me and Damon and Johnny Herbert and Mark Blundell, when we were doing Formula 3, yeah, it was just as bad. It was 150,000, 120, 130, 140,000 a year. So, you know, 30 years ago or whatever, that was pretty impossible to find. But finally I did. I got, you know, really fortunate with a major engineering company. They liked the idea. I'd set up a deal with Motor Magazine. Motor were giving me no money, but they'd give me coverage. And this was great for this engineering company. So it's just a question of keep thinking. Don't accept no. How can I get a sponsor? What does the sponsor need? How can I try and put all that together? And unfortunately, is that, you know, if you have a choice as a racing driver, is to turn up at the team, go to the track, test, feedback, engineer, set pole, win races. That would be the choice. If you don't have any money, you have to be a lot more creative and use your time to somehow get that money. But at the end of the day, with all the hard work, with all the creativity that had gone into it, with all the experience of finding sponsorship, I tell you something, still at the end of all that, you had to be lucky. And I actually was lucky to find this particular sponsor because they really changed the career trajectory. It put me into a great team and allowed me to do my job until actually I got a bit injured. But that suddenly gave me the security to say, wow, I can really approach this as I've always wanted to do. So yeah, it was such a reward. And then once you found a big one, then suddenly you start tacking on other ones because you're racing all the time. You know you're going to be racing, so you can forward plan with other sponsors to say, okay, you can be on here from the 8th race onward, and etc., etc. So that was how. And then I used my wages to invest into property, and that's quite an important story for a little bit later on because the property went well. Yeah, but I'll tell you about that and why I mentioned it in just a moment.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, sponsorship, I mean, it's quite important also to have that media coverage, isn't it? You need to be mentioned by the media quite often. I'll share a little story of mine. It was about 2 years ago, perhaps. We were at this karting track in the north, and I noticed they had a commentary booth. And they were going to be commentating on the races, and I thought, here's an idea. Why don't I commentate on the other races? Now, what I didn't know was the gaps between the races and mine were about 5 minutes. So I'd have to run up to the commentary booth, yell about all the action, because in karting, it's not like, oh, you know, they're 1 second behind each other. It's constant overtaking, isn't it? And I'd get out, I'd run all the way back to the team, quickly sip my water, and then I'd run with my helmet onto the grid, ready for the start from pole. So that was not something I wish to repeat.
Yeah, well, that's a brilliant story. But I tell you something, that's really creative thinking because suddenly the whole paddock is hearing your name and your voice, and from an authoritative point of view, as a top level racer, you know. So that all those kind of little things, I wouldn't advise doing the race before the one you were in because you need to calm it all down a bit, as you very well know. But it's a funny story. I like it.
Yeah. So you finally got to Formula 3, and you were quite successful in Formula 3. It was quite good. Your season, how it progressed, wasn't it?
Yeah, I was at the front end, but the biggest problem I had was by only the 4th race, I had a very severe injury to my right leg, and that was without crashing. It was just my leg was hitting the bulkhead part of the car, and it badly damaged the nerve that controls my right foot. So basically, there's your right foot, and it's quite handy if you can do that. with the accelerator and on the brake and controlling the brake and feeling pressures. Well, my foot had just gone like that because it wasn't receiving any messages. So I got a lot of treatment from Professor Sid Watkins, who was looking after the Grand Prix fraternity then, and Sid was really trying to help get me back. But in the end, I came back, still couldn't use the foot properly. So I was driving actually by lifting my leg up and down on the accelerator and my leg up and down on the brake. And of course, you just lose an edge by doing that. So that was a terrible punctuation because I'd come straight in and started going fastest in lots of parts of Formula 3. So, but that was the thing, is that exactly what you're just saying, you're creating attention then, and there was a lot of people in F1 that were looking at me even then. But just a silly thing like that slows your progress down, and in this game you don't need that, you know.
Yeah,
you need it all to go right all the time.
Yeah. Then you came back, didn't you? And it was actually in the wet where you had, I believe, your first outing in the wet, in the rain, and it actually went very well, but your foot wasn't quite up to it yet, was it?
Yeah, I kind of started going fastest in the rain nearly every time we had rain. So I think what that probably showed is that my car control and grip understanding was good. But what it was probably showing in the dry is that I wasn't clever enough yet on how to set the car up properly. And that was something that, you know, that you learn a bit more, because I was definitely, you know, you kind of hope that you think in the rain, it's going to come down to, it's about the driver. So I was kind of proving that, but I wasn't always fastest or even second or third fastest. I wasn't always in the dry. So something was going wrong, you know, and it was probably my fault for not engineering the car properly.
Yep. I mean, that just all comes with experience, doesn't it? Afterwards.
Yeah, and that's what I was getting, because this was the first time for me on wings and slicks, because previously it had been Formula Ford.
Yeah.
And yeah, that it was nowhere near as sophisticated.
And then Formula 3000, where the budgets were even higher, and that one was a real challenge to get into, wasn't it?
I love Formula 3000. Those cars were fantastic, and you know something, for me, the more power, the better. And I was really in my element because I was able to do, you know, lots of stuff with that. Sadly, you know, we were running on just shirt buttons as a budget. So when you're against the major teams who are testing all the time, as with anything, it's you know, you're now dealing with fantastic racing drivers. You know, you just can't give them too much of an advantage. But we did our little David and Goliath bit quite a few times, and you know, sprung some surprises. So where you can have a win in this game, if you haven't got the money and if you haven't got the equipment, is that you can have the win by kind of just developing a reputation, you know. So then hopefully other people are actually making excuses for you, or at least they understand what you're up against.
So it was quite difficult, but then you had a bit of a break, didn't you, with the factory route team? Unfortunately, just as it happened, the chassis was a bit poor, but you did get that chance with that team.
Yeah, but I only got the chance because they had produced a really bad car that year. Because the other drivers, I mean, Eric Bernard had a great outing with the route earlier in the year, but honestly, it was a one-off for Eric. You know, nearly all the other times, route were an awful lot of the time actually failing to qualify for the races. All the people that were using routes were in real trouble. So route had developed a dog that year. So suddenly the works team didn't have any drivers. So there was an opportunity. Okay, car's not that great, but for somebody like me who's just looking for any chance, it was a perfect opening. But this opens up the story about the house earlier, because Ron Toronak, who owned Route, still needed some sponsorship, and I couldn't find any sponsorship. So the equity that my wife and I had in the house, we basically signed it over to Ron Toronak to get the drive. You know, that was so that's what you do to just keep going. It seemed a good idea at the time.
I'm sure it did. Yeah. So then you had some, I believe there was some retirements and a 16th finish, which was the highest that car got up to, apart from that first place you mentioned earlier. And then you went off to America, raced very well there in what was quite an under-financed team. And then you tested for Arrows, or I believe it was called Footwork in 1991.
We managed to go back into Formula 3000 for just a few races the following year after Route. And that was with a Lola run from my friend's back garden, a great friend of mine called Roger Cowman. And again, other teams were giving us the tires, other teams were giving us the fuel and extra parts just so that I could get out there. If their drivers had actually known, they would have gone crazy. But we had some really competitive outings in that just to show the speed, you know. And it's that got me to drive in America in the IMSA series. So I went out to America and again was with a really small team. And we had a normally aspirated car and we were against the Works Jaguars, the Works Porsches, the Works Toyotas and the Works Nissans, who were all spending like $15 million to $20 million a year. And we were running on about $200,000 to $300,000, you know. So I could put it on pole position against these guys, but you know, most of the time we just weren't finishing the race. But that again, the British press were really trying to help me. So anything I was doing in America that was springing the surprises, they kept it in the press. I owe the British press so much. They kept doing that, especially a guy called David Tremaine, and there was Joe Sayward, and there was Tony Dodgins, and you know, Mark Gallagher, all sorts of people that were keeping my name right in there. So it was a couple of years. And when I say a couple of years, it was an on-off couple of years. You know, it wasn't every race, but the job got done. And it's that thing I was saying earlier about trying, if you can't win the race, is trying to build the reputation. So then suddenly in 1992, you got this new team, Andrea Moda, and suddenly they'd been through 2 drivers already, even without being on the track. Long story. But then there was 2 other drivers and they signed Roberto Moreno. They needed 1 other driver and my name kept cropping up. And so we had a chat and that was it. Suddenly, after all those years, I found a way to get into Formula One without having to take sponsorship. Because if I needed sponsorship, forget it. I wasn't going to go Formula One.
Yep. And what a team that would turn out to be, wouldn't it?
Oh, yeah. What a team.
And obviously, being in the presence of a karting superstar and a Grand Prix driver is obviously, I'm no knowledge of driving cars whatsoever, but I do know, fingers crossed, I know a thing or 2 about Formula One given my job. But the main reason that I love stories like yours, Perry, is the fact is that there's so many stories of success and so many stories of Lewis Hamilton winning 100 races, championships. It's nice to look at the teams in the 90s and the 2000s, which we can delve into and we can see why it went wrong and what happened. And the way that you have to start off it, Andrea Moda, they just bought Coloni, I believe it was. Why them? What did this plucky little outfit with their black cars and the shoe salesman, why go to this team? That's what really fascinates me with your decision.
Why me go to the team?
Why when they gave you the offer, why did you go to the team?
Well, I wanted to be in Formula One, Will. And there was no other opportunity to get in with any other team. Because even though I got fairly close with Ken at one point with Tyrrell, because Ron Toronak, who ran Route, behind my back, I didn't know, had gone to Ken Tyrrell and just said, you've got to sign Perry, you know. But Ken was full up with drivers at that time and contracts and sponsorship commitments, etc. So that one didn't work. Then there was maybe half a chance with Leighton House with the March, which would have been, you know, just brilliant to be able to get into that car. But again, they needed just some money. So I was knocking on the door and there were, you know, F1 knew I was around, but nobody could fit me in because the people who maybe could fit me in needed some kind of sponsorship. So wanting to be in Formula One, you kind of think, okay, there's this small team. There's probably going to be some problems, but just put me in it and we'll work on the problems from the inside. and I might be able to do something with this thing, especially if it rains, you know? So again, just that desperation, because there was, I guarantee you, there was, after all that I'd done in America, there was still no drives around.
Yeah.
You know, so that was it was kind of, it was the desire to be in Formula One, but it was also desperation as well. No question about it.
And you mentioned obviously people giving you chances. The person to give you that chance, Andrea Sassetti, what did he seem like when you first met him? When you signed the contract, what was your expectation of him as a boss?
You know, the real people who given me the chance actually were people who were working in association with him, because Andrea didn't really know enough about motor racing to really pick who he could have. So it was people such as Eddie Jordan's lawyer, which was Fred Rogers, and there was another chap called Duffy Sheardown who was working for Andrea Moda, and they were kind of charged with checking out who really should be sitting in that car. So they were the people who came to me. And also, funny enough, Nigel Mansell's manager, Mike Francis, had something to do with it. And all these people kept saying Perry. So Andrea, at that moment, listened and just said, okay, sign Perry, you know?
And we move on to your Grand Prix debut, a big day for you. You leave the pits in your shiny black Andrea Moda, and your engine fails. It didn't get off to the best of starts, and it sort of set the pace and the way that season would go for you.
Yeah, I mean, it was so exciting. The Grand Prix debut was supposed to have been in Brazil, but there was a combination of, they hadn't finished building my car, so that was never going to work. And then I had a bizarre Formula One license problem, which we had to get over. But Bernie Ecclestone, and also Max helped me achieve that, as did actually Frank Williams, Ron Dennis, Flavio Briatore, Marco Piccinini at Ferrari, and also Giancarlo Minardi. They all had to vote for me, believe it or not, for me to get my Formula One license. So once that nonsense was all done, then we turned up in Spain, and I'm now thinking, right, okay, let's go. Barcelona, get out there, learn the circuit, try and put a lap in. But then as I pulled out of the garage to line up in the pit lane, ready, steady, go, and then suddenly, boom, boom, and the engine went, and it rolled to a halt after 30 meters. And I tell you, I always told everybody I was going to set records as soon as I came into Formula One, and I did. I set a record immediately. The shortest ever attempt at qualifying for a Formula One race. Thank you.
At least you still made the history books, though. That is one thing that you can keep to your name.
Yeah, as you can guess, it wasn't quite the way I was hoping to make the records. But what was really frustrating is, because I'd just gone the other side of the pit exit, and the team were really close. They could hear me, see me, you know, but they weren't allowed to step over that line to bring the car back to get it started. Yeah. So that, sadly, we weren't to know it at the time, but that was the first of increasing frustrations and disappointments and bizarre moments with that Formula One team. But I guess because of all the craziness that surrounded that team and what was happening, I think that's why they've actually not been forgotten. You know, it's this tiny little team that messed up so badly, and this is why we're all still remembered.
Moving on to the British Grand Prix, your home race, obviously, in the background, Enrico Battaglia with the team, he'd offered some money, and at that point, Andrea Moda had already exceeded their number of driver changes. Did you know about the offer? Did you know that in the background that they were possibly looking to replace either you or your teammate, Roberto Moreno?
Yeah, this had actually happened way earlier than that, actually, because while Max Mosley and Bernie were sorting my license out, is that it was during the time between the Brazilian Grand Prix and the Spanish Grand Prix that that Andrea Sassetti, who owned the team, had turned around to Max and said, "Oh, look, don't worry about Perry's license. It's fine. We want to bring Enrico Battaglia back in because he's found $1 million of sponsorship." And Max just looked at it and went, no, you're keeping Perry. You've had there's a particular level of driver changes you're allowed, and they'd exceeded them. That was it. So so they were stuck with me. Whether Enrique did really have $1 million or not, I don't know. But it created a bad flavor in Andrea's mind, because now I'm proving $1 million more expensive because I didn't have any sponsorship, you know. And the team really did need some money, or need more money, or definitely need more expertise, because it had been fairly clear by that time that the only car they were even capable of trying to run was Roberto's car. My car was just really and truly being used to comply with the 2-car team regulations, which wasn't great for me.
Yeah, that brings us on into the next bizarre moment. The fact that they sent you out on wet tires on a dry track. Looking at it at first glance, you just sort of have to look back over it and think, was that a bit of an oversight, or did they know what they were doing?
Well, I mean, you're going to have to be Stevie Wonder not to notice that one, you know? It's like, that was just stupid. They kept me in the pit lane for a real long time in pre-qualifying, so that Roberto could go out to decide, you know, what he needed possibly from my car. Then finally, they were actually forced really to let me go out. But because they didn't want to use their slick tires, so on my car, we had these used wets, yeah, but it was dry. And of course, you know, the wets have got block patterns on them to disperse water. Well, in the dry, they're going to move around very, very quickly indeed and break up, disintegrate, and the tire will foul. So I went out, and on the first lap, I scored joint fastest time in that session because I'd really lost my temper. But then coming through to complete the lap, there was no tires left. So I went onto the grass, and I was so fed up because so many things had already happened by that point. I just went, I'm just changing up on the grass, you know, just staying flat, and which is really, really stupid, because that is a very, very good way to get massively hurt. But then I got lucky, is that the clutch disintegrated. So I couldn't continue with my stupid plan to enter an even more banzai lap, which is just as well, because it wouldn't have ended well. And then you finish that and you just go, yeah, I am being made to look like a complete idiot, you know. There was no question about it. And it had only been a year before when, you know, I'm setting pole positions, leading races in America, and that's it. And now you're looking like, you know, Mickey Mouse on acid.
What was the atmosphere like behind the scenes? Was there any particular part of the way the team acted or behaved towards you that really sort of made you almost feel like an outsider, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, there was no real engagement, to be quite frank. I actually just didn't end up spending a lot of time with them. There was nobody really on my car. And there was no need to have long conversations, because I'm not giving them feedback, because we're not on the track. We're not having engineering discussions to make this change or that change or anything else, because I'm not on the track, you know. So, and you know, by then I'm kind of going, this is stupid. And they were closing in even tighter and tighter really around Roberto's car. You know, if I'd been Roberto has actually said this, he, you know, helped convince the team to just say, look, you haven't got many resources. You need to put them all into me and into my car for us to do the best we can. Now, from my side of things, obviously that's, you know, terrible to hear. But from Roberto's side of things, it made sense, you know. In fact, it made sense. But what they should have done, they shouldn't have actually been in that position. They should have at least made some effort with my car, you know, which they weren't doing. And that was beginning, because it got a lot worse. That was beginning to prove dangerous for me, and also career destroying. That was the problem. But the determination to be a Formula One driver, the determination to think, hang on, hold on, stay in there, find anything that you can make work, anything that you can grab hold of. Because it would have been easy to walk off in a huff and just say, that's it, I'm too good for this, etc. There were no other opportunities. So the determination was to say, look, this is going so wrong. I've got to keep trying to bring it back. It had taken me 10 years to get there by then. So, you know, you don't want to be walking away too easily. So if anyone's wondering why I was putting up with it, there was I am the world's largest optimist. And you're just trying to find maybe the next race, maybe if I can have a chat with these people, maybe if they can understand what's going on, maybe we can corral and align them to just say, we've got to do this together, you know? That was the plan anyway.
And then we get to Hungary, one of the nicest circuits on the F1 calendar, in my opinion, one of the most exciting and one of the best to drive, certainly from what I've heard. But the team only released you with about 45 seconds left to go in the session, and you didn't get to set a lap. I think at that point the writing was on the wall in terms of everyone. If you were completely blind, you knew at this point.
No, you're right, Will. Yeah, that's exactly what was happening. I mean, you know, there'd been stories going up and down the pit lane anyway, because, you know, there were at least 11 or 12 of the Formula One drivers on the grid that I'd raced wheel to wheel with and beaten, you know, so they had a pretty good idea that something was going fairly badly wrong. I'd also worked with quite a few different people inside Grand Prix anyway, who had run me or been around me or something like that. So they knew as well. And then this, of course, was the icing on the cake, where, you know, they didn't even let me out with enough time to come round to begin one timed lap to try and qualify. So that I kind of snapped then and had a pretty big row with the team. In fact, I actually wanted to knock everybody out who stood in my way, you know. But even that was bad timing, because the Arrows team had approached me wanting me to test for them the following week at Spa. Now, I'd worked with Arrows before. They were keen to have me back, and maybe there could be a new future. And then but they said that they needed Andrea's permission. So after I've had this massive row, of course, that was never going to happen. So then I could have left the team and gone to Arrows and started testing for them. But the reason I didn't, that optimism thing again, is that I knew the next race was going to be at Spa. It's a circuit I knew well. I'd had a lot of success there. And if it rained, all that was on my side, I could maybe get this thing into the race, building a reputation. But things were about to get a lot darker at Spa, as I think you might know.
Yeah, obviously, I think you've already alluded to it when you were talking about the British Grand Prix, that the team were at this point and throughout the season taking parts off of your car and giving them to Moreno's. And there are quite a few rumors around circulating of what happened and what the true intentions were. But the team gave you a broken steering. I believe it was the broken steering column. It differs everywhere you look. Some say it's the arm, the column. Either way, just walk us through what happened in Belgium, because quite a lot of people reported that the team at this point were just trying to kill you.
Yeah, you may have a point. It was funny. I was getting ready for qualifying, and there was a journalist called Tony Dodgins, and Tony was standing next to me, and he was white, and he just looked at me and he said, "I don't want you to get in the car. I've got a really, really bad feeling." And I had the chat with him, a bit like we're having now, and I just said, "Tony, I've got no choice. Is that, you know, I'm trying to make a name. I've got to overcome this situation. I've got to do something to stop this downward slope." So I got in the car very, very focused, because I had an idea it wasn't going to last. So I was going to try almost on my very first lap to put in a real big lap. Silly thing to do, because you're never going to get anywhere near your absolute potential in the first lap. You won't, you know. It's like you need, you know, I reckon Ayrton would probably need 4 or 5 laps, you know what I mean? So it's like, but that was my determination, to try to just go, can I do something here? So I came out of La Source hairpin and headed toward Eau Rouge, and then just stayed flat, changing up with no previous experience of going through there in that car. I thought, okay, well, I'm going to enter flat and just hopefully hold it as I go in. The only thing is that it was probably good in a way to have had some of these bad experience with Andrea Moda, because it meant I didn't trust the car. So as I turned, you start lining up coming into a left as you go down the hill. And as I did that, I noticed that the steering actually was clearly, of course, steering's going to get heavier because the aerodynamic load, even on an Andrea Moda, is going to push the car down. But it was slightly wrong, you know? And so I immediately actually hit the brakes. But, you know, by the time you've done that, you're now actually facing the wall before you turn right. And so I'd hit the brakes and it wasn't turning right. Now, everything I'm explaining here, honest to God, happened inside a second, probably. So it's going to sound like an awful lot, but this is the things that happen. So like that, realizing on the brake, going straight toward the wall, still trying to take speed out of it. And while I'm pushing like that, it finally went just a little bit, which changed the angle, put me off the track, much slower speed now, but I hadn't come to anywhere near like a halt, up along the wall, just missed the wall, come out over the top. And I thought, Jesus Christ, what, you know, this is like, you know, some racing drivers say, yeah, I never get scared and everything. Well, you can't live being scared, but crikey, there are some moments that scare the daylights out of you. And that was one of them, because just a tiny little bit further on, that it wouldn't have ended well. And I mean, not well at all. So once I got to the top, I actually was going now a lot slower, and I checked the steering. Yeah, okay, it's moving. So I went a bit faster, checked the steering. No, it's tightening again. So I kind of knew what was going on, is that the steering rack was flexing. So if the steering rack is flexing, imagine that's the whole of the steering rack. It doesn't let the steering arm in. Yeah. So which means you can't turn. So it's like, you know, you're pushing against something that's jammed, you know. So I thought, okay, so I went back to the pits at fairly low speed where it would turn, because the aerodynamics aren't forcing it down, which is why the steering rack flexed. Are you with me? Is that making technical sense? Yeah.
Yeah.
So once I got back into the pits, I said, the steering rack's flexing. Steering rack is flexing. And they said, oh, we know. I said, what do you mean you know? And they said, oh, we tested it on Roberto's car last week. So you found that was flexing? Yeah. And you then put it on my car? Yeah. Well, this wasn't Formula One. This is stupid. I mean, really, really stupid. I don't think anybody, even I don't think anybody was deliberately trying to kill me. But they may have well have been, because it was just total stupidity. I mean, even a slow car like the Andrea Moda, yeah, it's capable of 180, 185 miles an hour, you know? So it's like, you know, is that was it. And it was heartbreaking, because my passion, and it had taken all my energy, clearly, of course, to survive all those years coming through motor racing with the dream of one day being at the front in Formula One, and I got there and everything else. But each week, something worse and worse was happening, and now this. And so there's not just the safety thing, but mentally you're incredibly upset. You know, I'm not the type to really let people see how down I was getting, but you know, clearly all your dreams are just actually going in a blender. So that was a shame. And then people found out what had happened, and the team were banned.
Were you surprised when the team were banned? Because obviously Andrea Sassetti had just been arrested for forging car part invoices, and the team were turned away at the next race. Quite a lot of people, although they weren't expecting a team to be completely banned from sport, because that's never happened before and never happened since, it wasn't surprising with the way things were going with the team.
Yeah, I mean, I think the team were actually banned for bringing the sport into disrepute. I think that was the major thing. But one of the things underpinning that was actually how I was being treated, because they had been warned that unless they start making a proper effort to look after me and my car, they're going to get banned. So they clearly hadn't done that. And then once this story had got back to everybody else, then they're going, well, you know, this game's dangerous enough, you know, especially was back then anyway. So that's it. So was I surprised the team got banned? No, I'd like to think I'm a professional. They weren't. So, you know, it is Formula One is a you know, an alignment of people who have worked terribly hard, whether they're engineers, designers, mechanics, racing drivers, team managers, whatever. And it's supposed to be the best of the best. Well, this wasn't the best of the best. In fact, this was, you know, terrible, absolutely terrible. So yeah, that was pretty much it. You know, I knew I wasn't going to be getting back in that car, because there's, you know, it's, you know, to first win, you got to first be alive.
Yeah, I think that basically sums it up. And people have dubbed you the unluckiest Formula One driver, and I think it's clear to see why.
Yeah, mind you, after saying that, you know something, is that they've got a point, but I will say that that day when the steering rack jammed, I think I probably did absolutely everything right. I think that there was probably a good level of skill going on there to get away with that crash. And then here's the next bit. I was also bloody lucky. Absolutely lucky. So yeah, I understand what people are saying about being the unluckiest racing driver ever. But I tell you, even after doing all that stuff right, I was, you know, somebody was looking down on me that day and just said, going to give you just a helping hand to stay on the track. So that day I was lucky.
So after that, well, you took a bit of a break from racing after that those Formula One adventures, but you came back with Dave Price Racing and the Painels operation for the FIA World Sports Car Championship.
I had to take a break from racing because we were in so much financial trouble. I mean, we'd lost the house by then. We was in massive debt because I hadn't been earning any money. And, you know, it's all very well being a racing driver, but you've got to put, you know, food in the family's mouth at the same time. So it'd been a crushing disappointment what had happened with Formula One. I was looking for a way back. I tested for Benetton, and that was a fantastic 3 days of testing for them. But the problem was, I only got the drive because Alex Zanardi was ill. So it was a shoe-in, did a good job, went really quickly. And it was exactly the same for Williams as well. So had the opportunity. Trouble was, I was against Dave Coulthard for the who's going to be the test driver on that one. And
never heard of him.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, it's a tall, good-looking bloke. Unfortunately, really fast as well. But the decision went to Dave. That's understandable. Yeah, it had to be one of us. Dave had a few things going on in the background, which is, you know, you use any advantage you've got. That's all there is to it, you know. But the net result for me was that I was out on my backside. There was nothing else going on. So I then had to just do some wheels and deals to try and get the family straight financially, because we were in a real mess, you know. But the racer in you wants to race. And so it was a question of saying, how can I come back? And this is what I do. This is my life. It's my passion. It's my focus. I've got to find a way back because it's also my job. Because by then, you know, I hadn't been trained as an aeronautical engineer or a draftsman or anything else that you might have as a job. You know, this has been full commitment to doing this. So, you know, it really needs to reap the rewards commercially, as well as, you know, your passion and what you want to achieve. Anyway, bit by bit, started dragging myself back in. There was some interest from a few people, and then I signed to drive for the Lotus GT team in the World Championship, paired with Jan Lammers, brilliant driver, fantastic guy. I've always thought the world of Jan. Didn't think the world of the team, so I had a falling out with them. Jan and I got them a second place at Silverstone, which actually could have been a win if I hadn't made a mistake in the pits. But I was so rusty by then, is that I made a mistake on restarting the car on getting in when I was leaving the pits, you know. So stupid mistake, and it could have cost us that win. But, you know, it was, you know, you can only overcome so much, and that was my mistake, you know. But anyway, we got the second place. fell out with the team, then signed with the Chrysler Works team for Le Mans. Enjoyed working with them. And I'd done kind of just about enough then plus I did a couple of Formula 2 races where I come second and third, I think it was. So that was great to be back in single seaters. And I'd done just enough to catch the attention of the new Panos team. And basically the drivers that they'd signed, which included David Brabham and also Andy Wallace, they were pushing Dave Price to actually sign me. And so that was very loyal and, fantastic friendships there to have done that. So I really appreciated it. And then Pricey gave me the call. So suddenly you're back in, being paid a good amount of money, personal sponsors again, but it's the GT World Championship. By then, I kind of knew F1 was, that was pretty much it. There was no way I was going to get money. So really the new focus was to join top factory teams in the World Championship and the World Endurance Championship. And that time with Panos then worked on what I was able to do, because then Audi kind of became interested in me. And then for 99, I signed with Audi UK and Audi Germany. So that was kind of, you're back and you're going, wow, it's taken all this effort, but I'm now with a great team, with fantastic teammates, with a fantastic manufacturer behind you. And then sometimes you look up and go, okay, it's all been worth it. But sadly, to be a highly, highly, highly successful racing driver, I don't mean a quick one, but as far as winning championships, you've got to have a lot behind you all the time. But I never let that stand in my way. If I had, then I would have walked off in a huff saying, I drive for a top team and I'm being paid a lot of money, or I'm not doing it. Well, that is available, but not to very many people. So I think that if I'm trying to give anybody encouragement, actually including you, because if you stay in this game and start coming through, you're going to face some of these issues, illustrious career in karting, and hopefully you can carry it over into motor racing if that's where you want to go. But if you don't have massive financial backing behind you, it's going to be a question of digging your heels in and keep punching. And that may not be what you want to hear, but it's a character test. And you've got these two lines in this game. You're hopefully fast and you hopefully get faster and you concentrate on your job. But the second line is that you've got to get the attention. You've got to tell people what you're doing, and you've got to engineer your position into being in a better position. Because, if you're driving a car that's 2 seconds off the pace, then if you're against brilliant racing drivers, you're not going to win, But what you can show is what you're made of.
Yeah, I think that's great advice to all of our listeners, who I'm sure we've got a couple of racing drivers as well out there, in addition to our listening. So to close on, Will, we'll talk about more contemporary issues in a minute, if you want to talk about the Top Gear years.
So obviously you're not just famous for your career as a racing driver, you're famous for several other exploits. And most notably, you were the original Stig. Now, what quite a few people don't know is that your Stig was originally black helmet, black overalls. So as a bit of a light-hearted question, we've talked about a lot of sponsorship and racing. What's better, black or white?
Let me answer that question. Black. Yeah, and it was an amazing series of events that led to it all, actually, because just part of what we've been discussing, and thanks so much for your interest in a career and having a chat about it. But as you can tell, it was punctuated with a lot of problems, lots of ups and downs. There were a lot of laughs, there were a lot of stunts with the things that went wrong. And everybody said, you've got to write a book. So finally I did. And because of the journey, I called it Flat Out, Flat Broke. And we'd said it at the head of the show. But for the hardback, the launch of the book, we had a great launch party in London where lots of friends from motor racing come and back me up, and some friends from television and other areas of the show business and stuff like that. And that was really nice of them to come along. But a couple of them were Jeremy Clarkson and Andy Willman, who's the producer of Top Gear. And it was there that they said to me, look, this was in late 2002, and they said, look, Top Gear's been off air for quite a while. By that point, they're going to bring it back, and we've got an idea, and we want to have this kind of secret racing driver. And Jeremy said, and you're going to be dressed in black boots, black overalls, black gloves, black crash helmet, a black visor, and we're going to call you the Gimp. And I said, nah, no, you're not. And they were real keen on that one. And I said, look, I'm not being called the Gimp because I have actually seen Pulp Fiction, and the Gimp was a nutcase dressed in black leather, locked in a basement and did nasty things to other people. So I said, no. And then so finally they changed their mind and they came out with the Stig. And of course, we had no idea how the new incarnation of Top Gear was going to go ballistic. 215 different countries it went into. And Stiggy became, because it was secret, everybody wanted to know, and everybody really liked the character of Stig. And I could bring my grumpy side into it by just folding my arms and standing there and ignoring people and stuff like that. Whereas in motor racing, you might feel like ignoring people, but you can't. So this is now suddenly the Stig could do whatever he wanted. So I was having real fun developing that side of it and enjoying driving the cars flat out, whatever it was. So that was great. So, and that really kind of, it was a lot of fun. I mean, I didn't want to carry on doing it forever. I really didn't, because I am a racing driver, you know, I like racing against them. So sure, I'd take whatever it was. If it was a Ford Fiesta, I would take it every bit as fast as I could around the track as I would try to with a Lamborghini or Ferrari or whatever. But it wasn't, you know, rewarding for me, so I didn't really want to stay. And it's not kind of my style to stay locked up and secret, you know. Richard Hammond was always proud of the fact that they took the mouthiest driver in motor racing and found a way to shut him up. So the rest of it kind of turned into a bit of history, really, on just going, okay, Stiggy, and it's something that's kind of stuck with me, but it's actually worked very well for me, and it's actually a real joy to have had that unusual thing as part of my own adventure, to be quite frank, you know. So it's been a roller coaster career, it really has. And that's why, you know, everybody, again, I'm sorry, I'm going to return to the book, because that's been maybe the proudest thing about my career, because it's been so taken internationally about the story. And let's say, I don't know, maybe people don't want to be exactly like me and my attitude, but you know, some people have, you know, been having a tough time. Some people have realized that if you keep applying yourself, maybe there's a way around it. And you know, I haven't got everything right whatsoever. I've failed in so many different things, but my focus when it was on the track or off the track or to try and get onto the track is maximum, is whatever it takes. And that's when everybody said, look, we can hear you talking through the pages, so you've now got to do an audio book. So having just finished that, it's going to be online really as from about the 10th of October. So I hope it brings a different dimension to everybody and they enjoy it, because I've enjoyed recording it. Had a lump in my throat a couple of times, I might add.
I suppose as well, the idea of an audiobook brings it to a brand new audience as well, because kids these days, quite a lot of them don't want to go to the library and get a book or can't buy it. But when they're on the bus and they can listen to it on their headphones, and they can understand and they can hear your story, it brings it to a new generation.
Well, Will, I've heard racing drivers ask what's a book, so you know it might be quite difficult to get through.
I like it, yeah. Well, the book isn't just populated with how to, or you know, this is how I got sponsorship things. It is all the laughs and the stunts and everything else. I think that's I've been very keen to, you know, make it funny, to be quite honest. But it'd be wrong to have it as all funny, because there was a lot of sadness and a lot of failure in it, and when you're losing friends in this game as well, there was some tragedy. But the overall thing, hopefully, is as everybody has said, is kind of it's a rompy story, you know. So
yep. So We'll close with two contemporary questions. Will, I believe you're first with what's going on currently in F1.
Well, it's a pretty simple thing. Obviously, I spoke to you earlier about modern Formula One for a bit as well, but the thing we didn't touch on is the modern championship fight. You back in the day had some fantastic championship fights in your day, obviously in Formula One, Ayrton Senna and Alain Prost in 1988 and 1989. But the year that you partook was perhaps one of the most dominant Formula One seasons, Nigel Mansell, the FW14B. How good is it to see a championship scrap to the point where we're seeing it now? Two of the best drivers in Formula One history locking horns and not giving each other any inches to breathe.
I think it's engaging because, you know, our crop of stars in Formula One are nearly all of them brilliant. You know, that we have this amazing array of talent. But then I guess that it's tiered, and I guess that you can probably pretty easily look at both Lewis and Max as being the absolute best out there. So to see these two enormous talents, and at different ages now, of course, you know, because Max is so much younger, but this ferocity and this intensity and this skill and this determination and this relentless pursuit to win, this is one of the things that is so dramatic about motor racing. Because if not, why are we tuning in? You know, we want to see this desire to win. We want to see the lengths that people will go to, hopefully not cheating or doing anything dumb, but it's that passion, and they're driven for it. Cars are a part of an awful lot of people's lives. An awful lot of people like driving. So now we're seeing two brilliant stars absolutely head to head, and it's exciting. And it's that excitement that we tune into sport, we tune into competition for that, to have that adrenaline rush, to be on the edge of the sofa, to be engaged, to be there with them, joining in that fight. I mean, you know, I'm an ex-race driver, and I could look at them all out there going, oh, I wish I was out there. I'm not. I'm on the edge of my seat when the red lights are ready to go off, and I'm watching every bit of the grid to see who's coming through, where's the gap, and I'm instantly thinking, I'd be there. He's going, whoa, no, what? I can see it coming, you know? Well, sometimes I can't because it all happens so quickly. But I'm engaged, and I'm engaged especially at the moment because of this incredible fight. So it's great.
And the last thing we'll close on is something that I've definitely been finding out, and something that we've discussed quite a bit now, and that is how difficult it is now for drivers rather, to get sponsorship. I mean, I've tried multiple times. I even took a leaf out of your book, Perry, and I actually tried the trick of phoning up different newspapers from different cities. Unfortunately, somebody called me back and they said, after the pleasantries, so where are you actually from? And then the line went dead. So yeah, that one didn't work for me, I'm afraid. But yeah, it's getting a lot harder now with all the social media stuff, isn't it?
You know, there's an argument to turn around to you and say, actually, it's getting a lot easier for sponsorship, because, you know, there is the opportunity to be your own publisher. You know, there is Twitter, there's Facebook, there's LinkedIn, there's Instagram. You know, you can create an awful lot of coverage. You can get a lot of followers. You can use all that to attract the motor racing press. So much of motor racing is now on television. So it's a question of packaging it, because, you know, don't get carried away thinking that motor racing is more expensive than it used to be. Formula One actually is, but I don't want to get into, like, you know, the actual amount of money versus inflation, etc. But F1 actually is more expensive than it used to be. But the other stuff was, for its time, was always unbelievably expensive. And for its time, it was always incredibly difficult to find sponsorship. I have driven against a whole bunch of guys who were so talented in the lower levels, who didn't go anywhere because they didn't have the food that motor racing needs, which is the money, the sponsorship, to get in and go forward, you know? So it's a kind of a, like Darwin's theory of natural selection. You know, you shake the sieve and only a few people get through every now and again. You know, money, sponsorship is the equivalent of food in Darwin's theory of natural selection. It just is. So you're going to shake that sieve, and there's going to be more people that fall out, or the other ones that just won't take no for an answer, and it might take them a bit longer to come through, but they'll find some kind of way to do it. But no, I don't fully accept it's tougher now. There are a whole load of things that if you're creative and you think, I can keep getting coverage there, I can keep using it there, and show the sponsor. What you do need, of course, is a lot of followers, and need to develop that. And that goes into that second career that I keep going on about, is that wouldn't it be nice to just be the race driver? But no, you've now got to be a social media star. You've got to find a way to build your followers so that you're worth more, so that you can get some zigzag. You know, I wish it was a downhill ski race. Start here, end there. But if you haven't got the sponsorship, it's a slalom. You go over there, and you go over there, and you go over there. But whatever it takes, after a long period of time, you might tire of it one day and just go, this isn't worth it. And that's where other people fall over as well and stop. But no, sadly, if you've got the bug, my friend, you're going to pay for it.
Well, I think this has been an absolute. I'm not sure how long we've spoken, but it's been an absolute great hour and a bit. I think I've absolutely really enjoyed this, Perry. I mean, thanks for coming on. I'm sure will agree with me. Yeah,
honestly, one of the most fantastic stories from motorsport that we've got in the last few years of the sport, and I'm looking forward to listening to the book again.
That's really kind of you. It's been great to meet you both. Thanks ever so much for your time on having me on here. And to your listeners, thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed it, and all take care. But thanks again for having me on, chaps.
Yep, and that's it from me, and that's it from Will. So thank you for listening, everybody, and goodbye.
Hi, my name's George Russell, and you're listening to Downforce Radio.